I never expected a charity auction to change my life, but when Ed's eyes met mine across that crowded ballroom, something sparked that I hadn't felt in years. The way he looked at me, confident, knowing, like he could see right through the elegant facade I'd carefully constructed, made my pulse quicken in ways I thought were long forgotten. We were supposed to be helping raise money for the children's hospital, but as the evening unfolded, I realized we were about to give each other something far more precious. His fingers brushed against mine as we sorted through donation cards, and I felt electricity shoot through my entire body. At 69, I thought those days were behind me, but Ed was about to prove me wonderfully wrong. If you're enjoying this already, do me a favor. Hit that like button and subscribe. Trust me, you won't want to miss where this goes next. The bomb. Grand Ballroom at the Ritz-Carlton Atlanta gleamed under crystal chandeliers, filled with Atlanta's finest in their evening wear. I smoothed my navy silk dress and checked my reflection in the ornate mirror one last time. At 69, I still turned heads, and tonight I intended to use every bit of charm I had for the Children's Hospital charity auction. Julia, darling, you look absolutely radiant, Claire whispered as she approached, her silver hair perfectly coiffed. At 66, my best friend still had that mischievous glint in her eyes that had gotten us into trouble since college. Thank you, honey. You clean up pretty well yourself, I replied, adjusting the delicate pearl necklace that had been my grandmother's. Are you ready for tonight's adventure? Before Claire could answer, a deep voice interrupted us. Excuse me, ladies. I believe I'm assigned to work with you this evening. I turned and felt my breath catch. Ed stood there in an impeccably tailored black tuxedo, his silver hair combed back, revealing strong cheekbones and warm brown eyes that seemed to see right through me. At 70, he carried himself with the confidence of a man who knew exactly who he was and what he wanted. Ed Morrison, he said, extending his hand. I'm handling the art donations tonight. Julia Harrison, I replied, letting my fingers linger just a moment longer than necessary as I shook his hand. And this is Claire. A pleasure, Ed said, though his eyes never left mine. I have a feeling tonight is going to be quite memorable. Claire excused herself with a knowing smile, leaving Ed and me to review the evening's auction items. As we worked side by side, cataloging paintings and sculptures, our conversation flowed effortlessly. He had a dry sense of humor that made me laugh, and I found myself leaning closer as we discussed each piece. This one's interesting, Ed said, pointing to a particularly abstract painting. The artist calls it Passion Unveiled. What do you think it represents? I studied the swirling reds and golds, feeling heat creep up my neck. I think it's about discovery, finding something you didn't know you were looking for. Ed's eyes darkened slightly. I couldn't agree more. As the auction began, we stood together at the side of the ballroom, watching as paddle after paddle rose for various items. The energy in the room was electric, and I found myself getting caught up in the excitement. When a romantic weekend getaway came up for bidding, Ed leaned close to my ear. Someone's going to have a wonderful time, he murmured, his breath warm against my skin. I shivered, turning to face him. What makes you so sure? Because the right company can make any place magical. The bidding was fierce, and as the price climbed higher, I felt Ed's hand brush against the small of my back. The simple touch sent warmth radiating through my entire body. Sold for $15,000, the auctioneer called out. The crowd applauded, and in the noise and celebration, Ed stepped even closer. Would you like to dance? I glanced around. Several couples had moved to the small dance floor as the orchestra played a slow waltz. I'd love to. Ed led me onto the floor with practiced ease, his hand settling at my waist as he pulled me into the classic position. We moved together naturally, as if we'd been dancing for years rather than minutes. You're full of surprises, Mr. Morrison, I said, looking up into his eyes. The night is young, Mrs. Harrison. I'm just getting started. As we swayed to the music, I became acutely aware of every point where our bodies touched. His hand was firm and warm at my back, his other hand holding mine with just the right amount of pressure. When he spun me gently, I caught Claire watching from across the room, a delighted smile on her face. Your friend approves, Ed observed, following my gaze. Claire has excellent taste, I replied. She always knows quality when she sees it. And what about you? Do you know quality when you see it? I met his gaze directly. I'm beginning to think I do. The song ended, but Ed didn't immediately release me. For a moment, we stood there, bodies still close, the rest of the ballroom fading into background noise. Julia, he said softly, would you like to continue this conversation somewhere quieter? My heart raced. I knew what he was asking, and I knew what my answer would be. Yes. Ed led me through the ballroom, past chattering guests and clinking glasses, to a smaller reception room that had been set aside for VIP guests. The space was intimate, with soft lighting and comfortable seating arranged around a fireplace. We were completely alone. Much better, Ed said, closing the door behind us. I was having trouble concentrating with all that noise. Were you concentrating on something in particular? I asked, moving toward the fireplace. You? He said simply. I've been thinking about you all evening. I turned to face him, feeling bold in a way I hadn't in years. What exactly have you been thinking? Ed crossed the room slowly, deliberately. I've been thinking about how beautiful you are, how the light catches in your eyes when you laugh, how graceful you are when you move. He stopped just inches from me, close enough that I could smell his cologne, something sophisticated and masculine that made my knees weak. I've been thinking about how much I'd like to touch you, he continued, his voice low and husky. What's stopping you? I whispered. Ed's hand came up to cup my cheek, his thumb tracing along my cheekbone. Nothing, he said, and then his lips were on mine. The kiss was soft at first, tentative, giving me the chance to pull away if I wanted to, but I didn't want to. Instead, I leaned into him, my hands coming up to rest on his chest. I could feel his heart beating rapidly beneath my palms. Ed deepened the kiss, his other arm wrapping around my waist to pull me closer. I melted against him, my body remembering sensations I thought were lost forever. When we finally broke apart, we were both breathing heavily. Julia, Ed breathed against my lips. You're incredible. Before I could respond, he was kissing me, again, more urgently this time. His hands moved to my shoulders, fingers tracing the fabric of my dress. I felt alive in a way I hadn't in years, every nerve ending tingling with anticipation. Ed, I murmured, pulling back slightly. We should be careful. Anyone could let them, he said, his eyes dark with desire. I don't care who sees. I want you, Julia. Here. Now. The boldness in his voice sent heat shooting through me. I looked toward the door, then back at his face, seeing the raw want there. Making a decision that surprised even me, I reached behind my neck and slowly unzipped my dress. Ed's breath caught as the fabric slipped from my shoulders, pooling at my feet. I stood before him in just my undergarments, feeling exposed but exhilarated. You're beautiful, he said reverently, his hands skimming along my arms. So beautiful. His touch was gentle but sure as he explored my skin, reacquainting me with my own body. When his lips found my neck, I gasped, my hands tangling in his hair. Touch me, I whispered, no longer caring about propriety or what was appropriate. Ed's hands moved lower, tracing patterns that made me shiver. Every caress was deliberate, designed to build the heat between us. When he guided me to the plush sofa near the fireplace, I went willingly, my body humming with anticipation. He knelt beside me, his hands exploring with increasing confidence. I arched beneath his touch, my own hands working to remove his jacket, his tie, anything that created distance between us. Julia, he murmured against my skin. Tell me what you want. You, I breathed. All of you. Ed positioned himself above me, his eyes never leaving mine as we came together. The sensation was overwhelming, a rush of warmth and connection that left me gasping. We moved together slowly at first, relearning rhythms that felt both foreign and familiar. God, you feel amazing, Ed groaned, his forehead resting against mine. I wrapped my legs around him, pulling him deeper, lost in the moment. Nothing existed but the two of us, the heat between our bodies, the soft sounds we made together. When release finally claimed us both, it was with an intensity that left us clinging to each other, breathless and amazed. We lay entwined afterward, my head on Ed's chest, listening to his heartbeat slow. The fire crackled nearby, casting dancing shadows on the walls. That was, I began, then trailed off, not sure how to finish. Unexpected? Ed suggested, his fingers trailing through my hair. Perfect, I said firmly. It was perfect. Ed chuckled, the sound rumbling through his chest. I have to admit, when I volunteered for this auction, I never imagined the evening would end like this. Neither did I confessed. But I'm glad it did. We dressed slowly, reluctantly, stealing kisses and lingering touches. When we finally emerged from the room, the auction was winding down, guests beginning to filter out into the Atlanta night. Claire appeared at my side almost immediately, her eyes bright with curiosity. Julia, darling, you look different. Glowing, actually. I felt heat rise in my cheeks, but I couldn't stop smiling. It's been quite an evening. I can see that, Claire said, glancing meaningfully at Ed, who was speaking with the auction organizers. Are you going to see him again? I certainly hope so, I replied, watching as Ed excused himself from his conversation and walked toward us. Ladies, he said with a warm smile, I hope you enjoyed the evening. More than I expected, I said, meeting his eyes. Julia, Ed said, reaching into his jacket pocket. I was wondering if you might be free for dinner tomorrow night. I know, a wonderful little place in Buckhead. I'd love that, I said, accepting his business card. As Ed kissed my hand goodbye, I felt that same electric thrill shoot through me. Until tomorrow, then. After he left, Claire grabbed my arm, her eyes wide with excitement. Julia Harrison, you absolutely must tell me everything. I laughed, feeling lighter than I had in years. Not everything, Claire. A lady doesn't kiss and tell. Since when? Claire demanded. And that was clearly more than kissing. As we walked toward the exit, I caught my reflection in one of the mirrors lining the hallway. Claire was right. I was glowing. There was something different about my posture, my expression, something that spoke of awakening and possibility. The valet brought my car around, and as I slipped the attendant a tip, I thought about the evening's events. Just hours ago, I had been Julia Harrison, wealthy widow, dedicated to charity work and her comfortable routine. Now I felt like a completely different woman, one who was ready for adventure and passion. My phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Ed. Thank you for the most wonderful evening I've had in years. Sweet dreams. Beautiful. I smiled as I typed back, thank you for reminding me that some gifts are worth giving. Can't wait for tomorrow. The drive home through Atlanta's quiet streets gave me time to reflect. At 69, I had thought my days of romance and passion were behind me. My late husband had been a good man, but our relationship had been comfortable rather than exciting. Tonight with Ed had awakened something in me that I hadn't even realized was sleeping. When I arrived at my Ansley Park home, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat on my terrace, looking out at the city lights. The warm Georgia air carried the scent of jasmine from my garden, and I felt completely at peace. My phone rang, and Claire's name appeared on the screen. I couldn't wait until tomorrow, she said without preamble. I need details. Claire, it's nearly midnight, and I'm too excited to sleep. Julia, I haven't seen you look like that since college. What happened? I took a sip of wine, considering how much to share. We connected, Claire, in a way I didn't think was possible anymore. Connected, Claire repeated. Is that what we're calling it now? It was beautiful, I said softly. He made me feel alive again. I'm so happy for you, Claire said, her voice warm. You deserve this, Julia. You deserve to feel desired and cherished. After we hung up, I sat for a while longer, thinking about Ed's hands on my skin, the way he had looked at me like I was the most beautiful woman in the world. Tomorrow couldn't come soon enough. The next evening, I spent an hour getting ready, trying on 3 different dresses before settling on a deep green number that Ed had complimented at the auction. When he picked me up in his sleek Mercedes, the look in his eyes told me I had chosen well. Dinner was at a small French restaurant tucked away in a quiet corner of Buckhead. The atmosphere was intimate, with candlelit tables and soft jazz playing in the background. We talked for hours, sharing stories about our lives, our children, our dreams for the future. I have to ask, Ed said over dessert, do you have any regrets about last night? I met his gaze directly. None. Do you? Only that we waited so long to meet, he said, reaching across the table to take my hand. When we left the restaurant, Ed walked me to my car, but instead of saying goodnight, he pulled me into his arms for a long, deep kiss. Right there on the sidewalk with people walking by, I melted into him completely. Come home with me, he whispered against my lips. I didn't hesitate. Yes. Ed's home in Virginia Highland was a beautifully restored craftsman bungalow, tastefully decorated with the art collection he had been managing at the auction. He poured us each a glass of wine, and we sat on his back porch, talking quietly in the warm evening air. Julia, he said eventually, setting down his glass and turning to face me. I want you to know that last night wasn't just about physical attraction for me. What was it about? I asked, though I thought I knew. Connection. Chemistry. The feeling that I've found someone who understands me. His hand cupped my cheek. I'd like to explore that further, if you're willing. Instead of answering with words, I leaned in and kissed him, pouring all of my feelings into the gesture. Ed responded immediately, his arms wrapping around me as the kiss deepened. This time when we came together, it was with the sweet urgency of people who knew they had found something special. Ed carried me to his bedroom, laying me gently on the soft sheets before joining me. Our movements were slower, more deliberate, each touch meant to give pleasure and show care. Afterward, as we lay together in the dim light filtering through his bedroom windows, I traced patterns on his chest with my fingertip. Ed, I said softly, I haven't felt this way in years, decades maybe. Neither have I, he admitted. I was beginning to think it wasn't possible at our age. Apparently, we were both wrong. In the weeks that followed, Ed and I became inseparable. We attended theater performances, art gallery openings, and charity events together. Claire was delighted by the transformation in me, often commenting on how I seemed to have found a new lease on life. One evening, as the 3 of us sat on my terrace sharing a bottle of wine, Claire raised her glass in a toast. To Julia, she said, for showing us all that it's never too late for passion. I felt heat rise in my cheeks, but I was too happy to be embarrassed. To friendship, I countered, and to unexpected gifts. As I looked at Ed across the table, his eyes warm with affection and desire, I reflected on how dramatically my life had changed. That charity auction had been about giving to others, but in the end, I had received the greatest gift of all, the rediscovery of my own capacity for love and passion. Sometimes the most generous thing you can do is open your heart to unexpected possibilities. Have you ever found love when you weren't looking for it? What would you do if passion knocked on your door after you thought those days were behind you? Share your thoughts in the comments. I love hearing your stories. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more tales of unexpected romance. Until next time, remember that it's never too late to surprise yourself.